The history of human civilization knows many truly great personalities, whose deeds to a certain extent changed the face of their contemporary era, redrawn the political map of the world. Among them are the great statesmen, military leaders or generals. It was wars that for many millennia determined the fate of not only individual peoples and states, but also entire historical epochs. The chronicle of world events is full of great wars, which often covered not only entire continents, but our entire planet. Small wars and military conflicts simply do not lend themselves to any account, especially in the ancient world. Such greatest conquerors in the history of world civilization as Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great, who once conquered half the world, still amaze the human imagination with their deeds. History convincingly shows that only those peoples or states that manage to put forward really great generals, military geniuses from their midst in a time of difficult, truly fateful trials, were able to survive and defend their independence. Such peoples and states were able not only to defend themselves and their right to the future with an armed hand, but also to dictate their own will of the winner to other peoples and countries. The generals created not only the military history of human civilization, but also determined its face during the years of wars. Their deeds on the battlefield, in battles on land and at sea, in military campaigns have become an integral part of the historical memory of mankind. In order to win in military or other battles, a strong trained army is not enough, a wise leader is also needed. There are cases in history when an army with a numerical advantage lost the battle due to the wrong strategy of the leader. Let's remember the famous commanders and sovereigns who have entered their names in history thanks to their brilliant victories. Alexander of Macedon, the great commander of antiquity, the king of Macedonia and the creator of a great empire, is better known as one of the most successful commanders in world history. He went down in history as a conqueror who did not lose a single battle. Such success was facilitated by the tactical talent of the ruler and the choice of strategy. The Macedonian army always acted quickly and suddenly, while doing so with small casualties. Alexander's most famous principle to this day is the motto, "Divide and rule." But his political activities are often forgotten. But it was he who created a new great state, which is located on 3 continents, covering an area of more than 2 million square miles. The empire stretched from Greece in the west to the Danube in the north. The southern border lay in Egypt, and the eastern one in the Indian Punjab. The whole country was united by a single trade and transport network. At the same time, the emperor managed to find more than 70 new cities. Alexander brought a common and unified Greek culture and language to his empire, and he himself did not hesitate to study the customs of other peoples in order to more easily manage them. For his own army, the emperor was an unsurpassed genius and strategist. He was an example of behavior for the soldiers, inspiring them with an invincible spirit. Even at one time, in antiquity, no one doubted that Alexander the Great was the greatest commander. Even then he was called the greatest. But Napoleon Bonaparte bowed more to the state talents of the emperor than to his military exploits. For example, in Egypt, Alexander paid a visit to the oracle, sacred in the country, which endeared the inhabitants to him. In addition, he left the former governors to govern the country, driving out the hated Persians and arranging festivities. Alexander, in fact, the conqueror of Egypt, was able to become an idol there. Contrary to popular belief that the famous phalanx was the main striking force of the Macedonian army, the main role in the attack belonged to the strong Thessalian cavalry. In the three most important battles with the Persians, at Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela, the Macedonian cavalry flank attack overturned the opposing wing of the enemy and thereby decided the outcome of the battle, while the viscous, inactive phalanx fettered the powerful center of the enemy. The Macedonian army, which did not exceed 30 to 40,000 people on the battlefield, was manageable, while the more numerous enemy armies fought almost spontaneously and the commander only determined the direction of the masses of people, but during the battle, he could change little. Like any historical event, the Battle of Gaugamela has much to teach even those who are not going to lead their phalanxes to conquer the world. On October 1, 331 BC, one of the key battles of antiquity took place. The army of Alexander the Great, who invaded the Persian state, completely defeated the king of the Persians, Darius III. Alexander brought to the field more than 40,000 warriors, and the Persians fielded an army that, according to some estimates, could reach more than 100,000 people. The balance of power is not in favor of Alexander the Great, but it was Darius who suffered a crushing defeat. This battle became a key one in the campaigns of Alexander the Great. The following phrases are attributed to the great politician and ruler. Heaven cannot brook two sons, nor earth two masters. Wars depend on glory, and often a lie that is believed becomes the truth. There is nothing more slavish than luxury, and nothing more regal than work. Nothing is impossible for those who try. Fortune favors the courageous. I do not steal the victory. This great ruler of the Qin realm. The dignity of Shihwangdi is called his activity to stop the centuries-old history of the warring Chinese kingdoms. In 221 BC, he was able to create a centralized state in Inner China, becoming its sole ruler. During the massive campaign to unify the country, important reforms were implemented to consolidate the gains made. The emperor proclaimed that all chariots should be with an axis of the same length, and all hieroglyphs should be written in a standard way. As a result of such positions, a unified system of roads was created in the country, and a disparate writing system was replaced by a single one. The emperor also introduced a single monetary system, a system of measures and weights. To suppress local tendencies toward sovereignty, Qin Shi Huang divided his empire into 36 military regions. The walls surrounding the former kingdoms were torn down. Only their northern part remained. Having strengthened them, the Great Wall of China was erected, which protected the country from nomadic raids. Shihwangdi was rarely in the capital, constantly traveling around the country. The authority of the emperor was so great that a huge burial complex was built in his honor during his lifetime. It was built by 700,000 people, and the burial perimeter was 6 kilometers. It is curious that, unlike his predecessors, the emperor refused human sacrifices. The tomb was found only in 1974, and it is still being studied. There was a whole terracotta army of 8,099 soldiers. Through the efforts of Ying Zheng, the Chinese lands were united under the rule of one ruler, which put an end to chaos and a period of national strife. The head of the newly formed state, together with Li Si, the prime minister, completely changed the foundations of life, foreign and domestic policy of the country. Qin Shi Huang adhered to the teachings of the ancient Eastern school of legalism, where the main idea was equality, which was determined by the law. The idea of distributing privileges and titles not by birth, but by real merit, has become the hallmark of the ruler and the hallmark of ancient times. Gaius Julius Caesar, the great ancient Roman commander, statesman, and politician, reformer, writer, and thinker, heir of the patrician family of Julius. The name of this man has long since become the title of Roman emperors. Many rulers after him were called Caesars, as if marking their great origin. Thanks to family connections, he had all the prerequisites for a brilliant career. Gaius Julius Caesar truly became famous as a commander when he conquered Gaul. He himself compiled a detailed account of these events, writing Notes on the Gallic War, which is still considered a model of military memoirs. Julius Caesar's aphoristic style also manifested itself in reports to the Senate. For example, come, saw, defeated went down in history. In conflict with the Senate, Julius Caesar refused to surrender his command and invaded Italy. Caesar entered the military history as a very controversial politician and commander, who suffered defeat more than once, but at a critical moment he knew how to win, it seemed, in hopeless situations. The originality of Caesar's military talent was fully manifested in the famous Pharsalian battle. Having previously suffered a defeat in the battle with Pompey at Dyrrhachium and losing the battle at sea, Caesar found himself with a weakened army in a hostile Greece, without a chance for help, in the face of a numerically and qualitatively superior enemy. Pompey's army outnumbered Caesar's in both infantry and cavalry. Pompey intended to overturn Caesar's left flank and throw the latter's army into the river. However, Caesar saw the impending danger and placed his best forces perpendicular to the line of attack. At the decisive moment, Caesar's elite cohorts attacked Pompey's aristocratic cavalry, trying to throw pills in the face of the enemy. In a fleeting battle, Pompey's cavalry was defeated and the left flank of his army faltered. As a result, Caesar managed to completely defeat the troops of his former friend and son-in-law, who ended up on the side of the Senate. The connection of Caesar with Queen Cleopatra is attributed to the same period. On his return to Rome, he participated in the Battle of Thapsus and celebrated his magnificent triumph. In the new field, he first of all introduced transformations that were beneficial to him. Then he carried out a reform of the calendar, named after him Julian. From now on, his statues were erected in temples, he wore luxurious vestments, sat only on gilded chairs, autocratically appointed and dismissed officials, behaved like a real dictator. The masses grew dissatisfied with his policies. Also, everyone did not like his relationship with Cleopatra, who by that time already lived in Rome. Then the conspirators decided to kill him during the March meeting of the Senate. Gaius Julius Caesar was publicly assassinated in 44 BC. Among his killers was the young Mark Junius Brutus, who, according to contemporaries, was his son. The following phrases are attributed to the great ruler. Great deeds must be done without hesitation, so that the thought of danger does not weaken courage and speed. It is easier to find men who will volunteer to die, than to find those who are willing to endure pain with patience. The greatest enemy hides where you least look. I came, I saw, I conquered. Genghis Khan is considered one of the greatest conquerors of all time. He conquered a quarter of the world's population and founded the largest empire. His army believed that he was sent by him from heaven, so they called him Holy Warrior. He conquered China, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, Baghdad, Khorasan, and some Russian principalities. The Mongol Empire became the largest unified state in history. It stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. In 1206, a Congress of the Mongols was held, Kurultai, at which Temujin was proclaimed the supreme ruler of the Mongol tribes and received the name, Genghis Khan. From that moment on, he starts countless wars, with the help of which he wants to enrich himself and satisfy the needs of the nomadic nobility, as well as to establish the dominance of the Mongol state among other countries. Numerous films and books have been written about Genghis Khan, not only because he brought order to the lands of his people. He is also widely known for his successful conquests of neighboring lands. So, in the period from 1207 to 1211, his army subjugated almost all the peoples of Siberia to the great ruler and forced them to pay tribute to Genghis Khan. But the commander was not going to stop there, he wanted to conquer China. The largest and longest war was with northern China or the Mongol Jin. It continued even after the death of the great ruler. Along the entire route of Genghis Khan and his army, Chinese troops surrendered to him without a fight, and some even went over to his side. In 1213, his army conquers the Great Wall of China and invades the territory of the Jin state, then conquers Liaodong, the central province of the empire. The most famous battle in the Mongol-Jin War was the capture of Beijing. In 1215, the Mongol army attacks the city, despite the peace concluded with the Chinese emperor. After a powerful assault on the main gate, the Mongols enter Beijing and begin to kill local residents and plunder the city. As a result, Genghis Khan razed to the ground the state, which was traditionally feared by everyone. Genghis Khan did not like traitors and guest killers very much. When the Persians beheaded the Mongol ambassador, Genghis flew into a rage and massacred 90% of their people. Genghis Khan left a huge legacy. He believed that the more offspring a person has, the more significant he is. There were several thousand women in his harem, and many of them bore children from him. About 8% of Asian men are descendants of Genghis Khan. Genetic studies have shown that about 8% of Asian men have Genghis Khan genes in their chromosomes. No one knows where Genghis Khan is buried. According to some reports, the grave of Genghis Khan was flooded by the river. Presumably, he demanded that his grave be flooded by the river so that no one could disturb it. The following phrases are attributed to the great ruler: "Better to be last amid wolves than first among jackals." Even a mighty warrior cannot break a frail arrow when it is multiplied and supported by its comrades. As long as you, brothers, support each other and help each other, your enemies will never gain victory over you. But if you fall from each other, the enemy can hit you like brittle arrows, one at a time. If you're afraid, don't do it. If you do it, don't be afraid. The ruler cannot be happy until his people are happy. If a man cannot abstain from alcohol, he can get drunk 3 times a month. If he does it more than 3 times, he is guilty. If he gets drunk twice a month, it is better. If once a month, this is even more commendable. And what can be better off not drinking at all? But where can I find such a person? If such a person were found, he would be worthy of the highest respect. One of the joys of travel is visiting new cities and meeting new people. Charlemagne, Frankish and Lanobard king, founder of the Carolingian dynasty, and the first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Charlemagne lived for 66 years, a considerable age for those times, of which 46 years ruled. In December 800, Charlemagne was solemnly declared Emperor of the West. By this time, his power included vast territories. All of France, Benelux, half of Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and northern Italy. In addition, part of Catalonia was subordinate to him. Judging by the chronicles, the emperor did not receive a full education. He could not write, but he read Latin. Despite his illiteracy, the Emperor of the West surrounded himself with famous scientists and thinkers. He initiated the so-called Carolingian Renaissance. He put a lot of effort into ensuring that the nobles, the clergy, and even the common people taught their children to read and write. Almost all his life, Charlemagne waged war. Only on the tribe of pagan Saxons, the emperor made 10 campaigns. In 772, Charles made the first campaign against the Saxons, burned their fortress of Eresburg, and destroyed the ancient pagan shrine, the sacred tree or Minsel. The Saxons considered this tree to be the embodiment of the world Ash Yggdrasil. This deed the pagans could not forgive the young king for almost 3 decades. Time after time they rebelled against the Christian king. In 769, having suppressed a rebellion in the south of the country of Aquitaine, he secured influence in this area. In 771, after the death of his brother, Charles seized his possessions. This was the impetus for the beginning of a feud with the Lombard king Desiderius. Desiderius, who ruled Italy, nominated his son Carloman as a pretender to the Frankish throne. Charles responded by annulling his marriage to Desiderius' daughter. In 772, the Lombards began a war by attacking the Papal States, which was under the patronage of the Franks. Pope Adrian I turned to Charles for help. At the Battle of Pavia in 774, Desiderius was defeated and taken prisoner. Charles proclaimed himself King of the Lombards. In the following years, Charles waged war on 2 fronts at once, in the north against the Saxons and in the south in Aquitaine against the Emir of Córdoba. In 782, enraged by another rebellion of the Saxons, Charlemagne ordered the execution of 4,500 captives at once. In 791, it was the turn of the Avar Khaganate. In the past, it was a powerful state that kept Byzantium itself in fear for decades. However, by the time of Charles, the descendants of the conquerors who came from the borders of China and before whom all of Europe once trembled, were rather lazy. After defeating them, the Franks took out so much gold that the emperor's treasury was overflowing until the end of his reign. In the last years of his life, Charles went on campaigns less often, preferring to send vassals to war. The Danes became the last serious enemy. In the war with them, the Franks had to meet the Vikings for the first time. Faced with the threat of raids by ships from the sea, Charles ordered the creation of special fleets on the rivers. Unfortunately, his sons and grandsons soon forgot this right idea. The emperor made the city of Aachen his capital. The following phrases are attributed to the great ruler. Right action is better than knowledge. But to do what is right, we must know what is right. If the population knew with what idiocy they are ruled, they would revolt. Hope is a dream for those who are awake. The 7th ruler of the Ottomans, Fatih Sultan Mehmed II, is a kind of boundary between the 2 periods of development of the state. It was under him that the country from the category of state passes into the category of empire. Mehmed II was born on March 30, 1432. 4th son of Sultan Murad II. At the age of 6, Mehmed II was appointed ruler of the Ottoman province of Manisa. After several notable defeats in the early 1440s, inflicted by the combined forces of the Crusaders led by the Hungarian general János Hunyadi, Murad II was forced to recognize the independence of the Serbian lands bordering Hungary. After that, he left the throne in favor of his son. In November 1444, the Battle of Varna took place. Then the Turks defeated the Crusaders, and 2 years later Murad II again ascended the Turkish throne. 2 weeks before the death of his father, at the very end of 1450, power in the Ottoman Empire was again in the hands of Mehmed. Becoming a sultan, Mehmed ordered the drowning of another contender for the throne, his 3-year-old half-brother. However, this was not something special at the court in the Ottoman Empire. Mehmed II received a versatile and excellent education for his time. It was Mehmed who created the central government of the Ottoman Empire, Portu. By this name they began to call Turkey itself, as the White House now understands, meaning the United States. Based on the sayings of the Koran, Mehmed II issued a code of laws, e. Understanding the importance of education for the prosperity of the state, Mehmed the Conqueror took care of the construction of schools in which young men were taught the tenets of Islam, grammar, jurisprudence, logic, philology and other sciences. The slowness with which Mehmed II initially acted in the field of foreign policy led to some confidence in Turkey's opponents in their own forces. This illusion was dispelled along with the realization of an old dream of Mehmed II, the capture of Constantinople. On March 23, 1453, Mehmed II finally developed a plan for the upcoming battle and set out from Edirne with an army and artillery. On April 5, Mehmed II stopped his troops numbering 100,000 soldiers at Topkapi and made a halt, and the next morning, ordering them to open fire from a large cannon, he launched an attack. The battle, which went down in world history as a 54-day encirclement and the capture of Constantinople, was completed victoriously. May 29, Constantinople was taken. The first thing the Sultan did was to issue a decree on giving freedom to all who remained alive. The city was turned into the capital of the Ottoman state and became known as Constantine, and then Istanbul. Mehmed devoted almost his entire life to conquest. In addition to Byzantium, he conquered the empire of Trebizond, Serbia, Albania, Bosnia, and other principalities. For all these accomplishments, Mehmed II was nicknamed Fatih, that is, the Conqueror. However, as mentioned above, Mehmed was a talented manager, otherwise, the empire would have collapsed soon after the death of the Sultan. The following phrases are attributed to the great ruler. To see the limits of probabilities, you have to try the impossible. We don't conquer lands, we conquer hearts. To turn away from the foe is cowardice. Misfortune is the fate of the foe. War is waged by everyone, peace, only by dignified people. Napoleon Bonaparte was a brilliant commander, diplomat, possessed an excellent intellect, a phenomenal memory, and an amazing capacity for work. An entire era is named after him, and his deeds were a shock to most of his contemporaries. French emperor, brilliant commander born in the family of a small landed nobleman. In 1785, with the rank of lieutenant, he graduated from the Paris Military School and served in a regiment in southern France. He was promoted to captain and sent to the troops besieging Toulon, captured by the British. Thanks to the plan developed by Napoleon, the British had to urgently leave the city. Napoleon, who was only 24 years old, was immediately promoted to brigadier general. In 1795, he decisively suppressed the monarchist rebellion in Paris, after which he was appointed commander-in-chief of the army in Italy, where he showed his skill by defeating the Austrian and Italian troops. In 1798 he went on a military expedition to Egypt and Syria, but arbitrarily left the troops to confront Suvorov's army in Italy. In 1799, on his way to Italy, he made a military coup in Paris, becoming one of the 3 consuls of France. In 1804 he became Emperor of France. Striving for world domination, Napoleon attacked Russia in 1812. Having united near Smolensk, the Russian armies tried to defend the city, but to no avail. On August 18, they had to resume their retreat towards Moscow. The general battle, given on September 7 near the village of Borodino in front of Moscow, did not bring Napoleon a decisive victory. The Russian troops again had to retreat. On September 14, Napoleon Bonaparte's army entered Moscow. On October 19, he left the city in a southwestern direction, as he did not find food supplies here. In this regard, he was forced to retreat further towards the Russian border. After receiving word of an attempted coup in Paris and desiring to raise new troops, Napoleon left for Paris on the 5th of December. In his last bulletin, he acknowledged the catastrophe, but attributed it solely to the severity of the Russian winter and the lack of food supplies. In 1814, Napoleon abdicated and was exiled to the island of Elba, retaining the title of emperor. A year later, he landed on the coast of France and moved to Paris, where the government of King Louis XVIII was located. The new reign of the emperor lasted only 100 days and ended with his defeat at the Battle of Waterloo in June 1815. He had to abdicate the throne a second time. The internal policy and reign of Napoleon Bonaparte was aimed at establishing himself more as an emperor. He undertook important reforms and innovations that are valid and supported by the French state to this day. After the coup in France in 1802, Napoleon and his associates participated in the creation of the Civil Code, which was based on the postulates of Roman law. Some of these innovations still form the basis of state laws. Napoleon ended the anarchy, approved the law that ensured the right to property. French citizens were given equal rights. City halls were set up in all settlements, mayors were appointed. The legitimacy of Bonaparte's power was recognized by the Pope. The following phrases are attributed to the great ruler. Envy is an admission of inferiority. The only way to lead people is to show them the future. A leader is a merchant of hope. You must not fight one foe too often, otherwise you will teach him all your martial arts. Strongest are kind, only the weak are evil. Only those who want to deceive the people and control them can keep them in ignorance. Victory is not won by numbers. Alexander defeated 300,000 Persians at the head of 20,000 Macedonians. There are thieves who are not punished, but who steal the most valuable thing from people, time. Abraham Lincoln, an American statesman, was the 16th President of the United States. He held this post from 1861 until his death. Lincoln became the first Republican president. Abraham Lincoln is a common man born February 12, 1809, in Kentucky. Lincoln, who grew up in poverty, reportedly only spent 12 months in any type of formal school. Worse, some of his teachers were poorly educated. He was primarily self-taught and was very fond of books. Mr. Lincoln's personal philosophy was based on reason and respect for the law. Nothing for him was lawlessness, everything was regulated by law. There were no accidents in his philosophy. Each event had its own reason. Being the 16th President of the United States has never been an easy road, but through his principles, he won the hearts of the people and led them convincingly. Abraham Lincoln was a man of deep feelings, of just and firm principles, and of incorruptible integrity. In politics, he would never try to mislead. Honesty was an important value to Lincoln throughout his life. Criticizing a wealthy political opponent in the 1830s, the young Lincoln said, "I'd rather die now than, like a gentleman, change my policy and at the same time get an office worth $2,000 a year and then have to erect a lightning rod near the house to protect a guilty conscience from God's curse." He is considered to be a national hero in America because this president entered the history of the country as a liberator of slaves. Lincoln occupies an important place in the minds of Americans. He was able to prevent the collapse of the United States. Under him, the formation of the American nation began. Slavery, as a crutch interfering with the further normal development of the United States, was abolished. Lincoln laid the foundations for the modernization of the southern states of the country, formerly backward and agricultural. Under him, the emancipation of slaves began. Lincoln owns the basic formulation of democratic goals: to create a government by the people, from the people, and for the people. Lincoln was able to build a railroad across the entire continent, linking the coasts of 2 oceans. He expanded the state infrastructure, created a new banking system, and was able to solve the agrarian problem. After the end of the Civil War, the government faced many problems. It was necessary to unite the nation and equalize the rights of the population. Lincoln's strict moral principles allowed him to mobilize all the forces of a fragmented country and reunite it. The following phrases are attributed to the great ruler. Those who deny freedom to others don't deserve freedom himself. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. The sheep and the wolf understand the word freedom in different ways. This is the essence of the disagreements that prevail in human society. People who have no faults have very few virtues. You can fool all the people some of the time. You can fool some of the people all the time. But you can't fool all the people all the time. The fact that some achieve great success is proof to everybody that you can also achieve it. If you want to succeed, keep believing in yourself even when no one else believes in you. It's impossible to fail until you give up. When I do good I feel good, when I do bad I feel bad, and that's my religion. I would not want to be a slave, and I would not want to be a slave owner. This expresses my understanding of democracy. I am a slow walker, but I never walk back.